Good evening, everyone. I'm going to call the regular meeting of the Ojai City Council and the Ojai Redevelopment Agency Successor Agency meeting for the regular meeting for August the 27th, 2013 to order. Thank you, everyone, for being here that's in the audience. Could we have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Lara?
Here.
Councilmember Clapp? Here. Councilmember Smith's not here at the moment. Mayor Pro Tem Strobel? Present. Mayor Blatz?
Here. And if we could have Mayor Pro Tem Strobel lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
Please follow me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Once again, welcome to everyone tonight. If anyone wishes to address the council on either scheduled items or unscheduled items, we would appreciate it if you would fill out a speaker's card. It's a green card. It's out in the alcove, and then pass it to Rhonda. I have a couple of cards here already, but if anybody else wants to address us, if you'd fill one of those cards out, that would be great. We have two presentations tonight. The first one is Court-Appointed Special Advocates, CASA, of Ventura County, Miriam Mack, Executive Director. Hi there.
Mayor, thank you. Members of the City Council.
She'll get it up there.
She'll get it up there?
Yeah.
Thank you for allowing me some time on your agenda to address you. I am here on behalf of court-appointed special advocates to tell you about our organization and hopefully to inspire you and people who are watching to consider joining us, becoming one of our volunteers who become sworn officers of the court and supporting us. So I have very selfish reasons for being here. CASA is actually part of a nationwide movement. There are about 950 programs around the United States and around 44 in California. What we do is we recruit, we screen, we train, we supervise community volunteers who then become sworn officers of the court and are then advocates for a child in the foster care system who's appointed to our program by the juvenile dependency judge. And our mission is very simple. We are to be a powerful voice for abused, neglected, and abandoned court-dependent children through its trained, compassionate volunteers. We've been in Ventura County since 1985, mostly operating under the umbrella of other nonprofits. We just became independent in 2011, and a lot of people confuse us with Casa Pacifica, who's our partner and actually our lessor. We sublease a little corner of one of their office spaces. And so we really have a job. If we're going to really serve well the children in the court-dependent system, we've got to get the word out, and that's why I'm here. The little note at the end shows that we're actually part of the system. CASA is set forth in the California Welfare and Institutions Code, California Ventura County Rule of Court. There's a national organization, California organization. So we have a very important role to play, and it's recognized by our governmental institutions. I'm supposed to do this. What's the problem? What's the problem? Well, you don't think of it too much. It's not part of sort of your responsibilities, but in fact, the County of Ventura receives about 10,000 calls each year to its hotline for child abuse. And it investigates around 6,000 calls, resulting in over 500 children being removed from their homes every year. Last year, there were actually 13 in Ojai who had to be removed from their homes. Right now, there's over 1,000 children in the system. They live in Casa Pacifica and other residential shelters. They also live in foster homes. There's about 248 in the county and around 13 or so in the Ojai Oakview area. And the statistic that I have to speak to is that 42%. And what that means is that children, 42% of the children who are in the foster care system for 12 to 24 months experience 3 or more placements. 8 placements is not unusual. And what you have to understand is that these children not only are changing, their caregivers are changing, their neighborhoods are changing, their teachers are changing, their social workers also change. I mean, their whole life is as emotional and upsetting, I think, or challenging the circumstances that cause them to be removed from their homes. Foster care also presents challenges. And so that is why we have our advocates, our court-appointed special advocates, who are, I like to say, more than a mentor, more than a friend. This advocate is really perhaps one of the only constant adult presence in the child's life. The role is to provide information to the court regarding the child and to represent the best interests of the child. The responsibilities of an advocate are to meet weekly. We ask for about 12 to 15 hours a month of interaction. They have to advise us what's going on so we can report to the state. They're part of the professional team. They work with social workers. They have access to therapists. They have access to the teachers. They're really part of what's going on. And sometimes they know more than anybody else because they have the most frequent interaction. And we ask them to go to court about twice a year and to write reports to the court, independent reports to the court about what they see and what they recommend. Anybody can be an advocate. Our advocates come from all walks of life. They are subject to extensive background checks, personal references. We have 30 hours of training that occur 3 to 4 times a year with curriculum that's specified by the state. And so last year, just to let you know what we were doing, we had 142 volunteers who advocated for 208 children, donating around 18,000 hours. And that average tenure is very interesting because children, we like to see them out and in a permanent placement within about 2 years. Our average tenure with our advocates is about 3 years, which makes me, which demonstrates that they really stick with that child to whom they're assigned for the duration until that child achieves permanency. And we have anywhere from 40 to 80 children on our waiting list just waiting for an advocate to come and help them out. So, why I'm here, hopefully people in the Ojai community might consider joining us and participating in our training and becoming a sworn advocate. We get less than a third of our operating budget from the state. We depend on individuals, service groups, community foundation. Ventura County people are incredibly generous, and we really appreciate their support. And we are trying to become self-sustaining and establish ourselves. Our first ever elegant pop-up dining event will be October 12th. I understand the mayor is coming, and we look forward to seeing him. It's like a great outdoor picnic in elegant white and black. Bring your own food. It'll be really fun. Check our website. I have a save the date card, but we're all up on our website, so we're good to go. I can't tell you where it is. You have to wait till October 12th. So there I am, there we are, and we are really making our pitch, so to speak, all over the county, from Ojai to Simi to Port Hueneme. We are all part of this. We're all working together for our children who need our help, and I thank you very much for your time. Answer any questions if there are any.
Thank you very much. Any questions of the council?
I just have a question. How old are the child usually? What's the average age?
Ours appointees are around our school age, from around 5 to 18. That's been our core group right now. We may be expanding, but the children in the system are actually up to 21.
Great job.
Thank you.
Marion, why are the children relocated so often before they find permanent placement?
Well, the children have a lot of problems, and when they are invited into a foster home, it may not always work out. There's a lot of responsibilities that the foster parent has to fulfill, appointments, therapy appointments, doctor's appointments, and sometimes it doesn't work out, and they have the ability to give notice. Some children need more support that can be provided perhaps through residential care. It's a very tentative, tenuous life until permanency is achieved.
Yeah, because you said that sometimes it can be 12 relocations.
Oh my gosh. It can be a lot of relocations.
And I just wondered whether it was more because of the problematic nature of the children, or if it's the actual foster care parents that have or are overloaded or have problems with particular kinds of children.
Yeah. You know, everybody in the system is doing their ultimate and their utmost, and it's people and it's families, and sometimes the challenges are more than they can cope with, and perhaps a different circumstance is needed.
Well, thank you. Any other questions? Yes.
Yes, thank you, Mayor.
Councilwoman Smith.
Are there any changes in laws or that you would like to see to help these children be adopted earlier and find a permanent home? Or what would you see? How would you like to see the system move so that these children go into a permanent adopted home? If the parents, let's say 3 times or whatever, have found themselves to be unfit or whatever it is.
Well, certainly permanency is the ultimate goal, and there are various steps along the way. Permanent planning is one of the first tasks that the social workers undertake. There's family maintenance. There are opportunities for the child to be reunited with the family, provided the family or the parent has perhaps gone through various counseling and various services. California's really in the forefront right now. They adopted AB 12 a few years ago, which allows extended service to children so they are not thrown out on the street, so to speak, when they turn 18. And that process is now, these children, these older, we call them non-minor dependents, are getting some support, some housing support, provided they work and have jobs, and that's always a challenge too. So the older children are at risk for crime, homelessness, and that really needs to be worked on.
Any other questions? No? Thank you. I look forward to seeing you at your event.
We want all of you, but thank you. We look forward to seeing you too. Thank you.
Well, tonight we have the pleasure of a second presentation as well. Mary Lynch, the Ojai City Librarian, is going to give us an update on the state of our library. Welcome, Mary.
Thank you,
Thank you
Mr.
for
Mayor,
being here.
council members. I have a lot of paper here, but most of it's handouts. I'll be very quick. One of the things about a library, we have a lot of words, but libraries report in numbers. So here come the statistics. This last fiscal year, 2012-2013, Ojai Library checked out 103,343 items. We answered 2,062 reference questions. We have 15,127 registered patrons, which is pretty good for a community that only has about 8,000 people. We owned 38,073 items. We placed 7,070 requests for items not held by Ojai Library or in use by other Ojai Library patrons. The limited book budget this year resulted in the addition of only about 1,500 items, most of them donated. As an example, we have a collection of 3,000 DVDs. More than 95% of that collection was donated by the community. I've been told we have a very eclectic collection. But eclectic or not, it's the most heavily used collection in the library. We have provided approximately 11,600 hours of internet service. There were 6,815, I know this exactly, views of Ojai's webpage. This year we added a linked list of all the Ojai nonprofit and service organizations that we could find. If you do go into the Ojai webpage and click on our list, and your favorite local nonprofit isn't there, my email address is, so you can email me and let me know what we missed. There were also 1,715 wireless sessions. The wireless access is used heavily enough that we had to install a second router. Both routers are up 24/7, and there are often people in the patio at night or in the parking lot using the internet. Our Facebook page has had 188 likes, and nobody has unliked us. The newly installed People Counter reports that Ojai Library is the second most heavily trafficked library in the system, right after Foster. And again, that you're looking at a difference between 103,000 people in Ventura and about 8,000 in Ojai. So we have a lot of people coming through. We presented 149 adult programs with 1,681 participants and 110 children's programs with 2,203 participants. Our programming statistics are up about 14% for children's programs and about 10% for adult programs. We are still open 55 hours a week for 2,780 service hours a year, and the Homework Center was open for 138 days with 2,142 participants. This year, we applied for and received the Muslim Journeys Grant through the American Library Association and the National Endowment for the Humanities. We have presented 2 programs in partnership with the Islamic Center of Ventura County. There were 43 participants and 2 crank emails. We once again participated in WordFest, 30 programs, 400-plus participants, and we offered a 4-week-long basic computer course, which was full immediately. One of the things I have for you in this list of handouts is a list of the databases that you have access to with the library and your library card. The 2 newest are Zinio, which is over 100 magazine subscriptions available online, ads and all. You set up an account and you can click on it and read your magazines online. Also, there's Freegal. It's millions, and I do mean millions, of downloadable songs from over 10,000 record labels. You only get to download 3 songs a week, but you get to keep them. They're yours forever. And Freegal will remind you each week that you can now download 3 more songs. Our newest database is IndieFlix, and it's not on this list yet. It makes available thousands of film festival films from more than 50 countries, including some from Ojai's Film Festival. We are represented there. Filmmakers can submit their films to IndieFlix, and if accepted, the films can be seen by independent film lovers all around the world. We accomplished all this with 4 full-time equivalent staff, 4 student workers, and a long list of wonderful volunteers. And last, 2 big projects. The library and Ventura County are planning for new ADA-compliant restrooms in the library. Right now, we expect to be closed for the first 2 weeks in December while they jackhammer out the old bathrooms and the new configuration is installed. We are very pleased that people with wheelchairs will be able to get down the hall easily, and that there will be sufficient turning space in the restrooms so that the fixtures will be installed at a height so it's easy for everyone to use. We're really looking forward to it. Also, Ventura County is working on acquiring and scheduling a bookmobile. It will eventually run 6 days a week on a 2-week schedule, and we would appreciate any input from the City Council about appropriate places for bookmobile stops. We expect there will be at least 2 stops in the Ojai area. And that's it. Any questions?
Well, thank
Mr.
you.
Mayor, I
Any
have a
questions?
I have a question.
Yes, Councilwoman
How
Cloud.
many items did you say were checked out?
103,343.
Okay. I thought I
That's
heard
over a
1,000.
year.
I thought I heard 1,000. I thought, no way.
No,
Yeah, okay,
that's over a year.
103,000 over a year.
Our statistics are not as impressive as some of the larger libraries.
I think that's
We run
impressive.
about 10 to 12,000 items a month, about that.
Great, thank you.
Yes, Councilwoman Smith.
I was at a meeting, and so happened Mayor Blatz was there, where there was some rumor about a change in use of volunteers. I know volunteers are heavily screened. They have to go through, make sure they're not on any child criminal list. But has there been any change in the using volunteers, or is that
Not for
predicted?
Ojai.
Not for Ojai.
Not for Ojai. The main change in using of volunteers were at the libraries where they used volunteers to conduct story time. We don't do that. We have Diana Goodrow and Julie Albright. They handle our story time, and they are both
staff, and so is the...
They are both county employees, yes.
So story time is handled in other county libraries by volunteers, and that will have to change due to what?
I have not gone to the Children's Services meeting, but it has to do with wanting to make sure that the children get a particular type of story, that they get the finger plays, and they get the songs, and they get what they need to bring them up to core competency.
So that has been handled by non-library trained people in other branches, and now it will have to go to a library-trained staff member.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Is that going to have any effect on some of the children's programs, do you think?
No.
All right, any other questions? No?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We appreciate you being here.
Well, I just need to say, for those of you who are very used to getting your fiction or books through Barnes and Nobles, think about getting it through your library and put that $30, $40, $50 to a donation to your library. It could help your local library so much. And I cannot tell you how much the library adds to my life, and certainly changed my life as a child. So I highly recommend thinking of putting your local library on your donation list.
Oh, it's the ultimate in recycling.
Thank you again, Mary. Appreciate it. I forgot to welcome Chief Kenny back. Sergeant Arthur did a fine job in your absence, but it's nice to have you back.
Yeah. No, I'm back. Just my wing's still a little broken, but I'm back.
Good, good.
Good to be back.
Well, it's nice to have you. We didn't have any place in our agenda for commission reports tonight for some reason, but I see that Chair Golden, Christine? Hello. I said our agenda didn't have anything on for commission reports, but I see a number of your people here, so come on up. I'm glad we got your attention.
Yes. Can I blame that on Susan?
Yeah, Susan, you're the culprit.
Well, things are popping with the Arts Commission. I wasn't here last month to point out the wonderful new exhibit we have by Steve Curry. And for those watching on TV, there are many, many more paintings down the hall by Stephen. And it's worth coming over and taking a look and seeing what he does with light in particular. He's really adept at bringing out the light in a painting. So I'm hoping that you're all enjoying the paintings that we have on display for you. And our next exhibit is going to be a retrospective, more or less, of Phil Harvey's work. You all know Phil, and we felt it was time to honor him. He's in his 90s, as many of you know. And so we want to really put up a unique show. And not only are we going to show some of his iconic photographs of Ojai, such as the clock tower, but we're also going to have some photos that may surprise you from other areas of the West, where he's gone and taken photographs. So we'll look forward to that. That's going to go up in a couple of weeks. I'd also like to let you know that our mentor program is going along exceptionally well. We've gotten some feedback from the 3 artists and the 3 students as to the projects that they've completed, and we'll be having a huge public reception in November that everyone is invited to come and take a look at what happens when a young person has the chance to work in a studio with an artist of some repute. So Doug Lochner, who is a well-known Ventura County sculptor, is one of the artists, Bernadette DiPietro, and then our own John Slade. John is working with a student. He's written an entire play that he's going to perform with music on Bob Dylan. Bernadette has had her student work in numerous media, as well as she's taken the student out to visit innumerable studios of artists here in Ojai. So it's been just like a potpourri for that student. And we are waiting to see what kind of sculpture or public art piece that our student is going to produce with Doug Lochner, but we're really excited. Last thing, aren't you glad you got me up here? Last thing is, I hope everyone will look in the paper. I think it went in this week or it's out tomorrow. There will be a press release announcing the events that we're having at the Ojai Theater, the Playhouse. We are going to be showing episodes from Art 21, which is a PBS series. And we're hoping that we're going to get people to come and take a look at those shows. You really get inside the mind of an artist and see what the creative process is. Several of us that are on the committee watch some of these shows, and you will not be bored. You will be happy that you came, and we're looking at arranging a little talk fest after the showings at Jester. That's still in the works, but we're hoping that we can pull that off as well, so people can actually gather after the films and talk about what they saw. It should be really exciting. So we're one busy committee, and I know you're reading our ordinance tonight, so we're, our public art ordinance, so we've been working on that too.
Well, thank you.
Any questions?
Thank you. Any questions of Chair Golden? No, just thank you and all the members of your commission. As always, you're doing a
Welcome.
wonderful job.
Thank you.
Thank
I'll
you.
pass it on.
Thank you. Are there any other reports from commissions this evening? I don't see anybody. All right. Well, before we go to the public communications part of our agenda, Councilwoman Smith asked to have a moment.
Thank you very much, Mayor. In August of 1963, I was 18 years old, and I woke up at 4 a.m., went to the Central Bus Station in New York City, and myself and two friends, for the very first time in my life, we took the bus to Washington, D.C. And the event was the March on Washington, and I was overwhelmed by what I saw and what I heard. It was on the D.C. Mall, which I had never been to. There was every shade of black people, brown people, and white people there. And it was absolutely breathtaking. We all listened to speeches. Martin Luther King, of course, I believe he was assassinated in 1968. But he was very young when he was assassinated, but in 1963 he was even younger. And we all sang at one point, "We shall overcome," crossing hands. And it was one, for me, and I think for the country, one of the most outstanding events of the 1960s. I think it opened up the next stage in race relations, which had been stagnant for quite a while. And it was truly a seminal event of the 60s. There was one other seminal event that happened in the 50s, and I think people forget who don't remember it. And that was Jonas Salk's coming up with the polio vaccine. It was the Salk vaccine. And the difference, the summer before the Salk vaccine, every swimming pool in the country was closed. Parents lived in fear of their children getting polio, which is a viral disease. For every 10 children who got polio, nine of them would get a stiff neck, a bad flu, and get better. But the 10th one would develop bulbar polio, which could lead to paralysis. Worst case would be they'd be on what was called an iron lung. But the better case would be they'd be left with atrophied muscles. The vaccine came out. Every child in America was lined up in their school, in their nursery school, in their clinic, and received the vaccine that year. The following summer, there was no polio. No polio. So it was dramatic achievement. And I have problems with today's parents saying vaccines are dangerous, etc. They do not have the historical memory of what it was like before the polio. Did anybody else old enough to remember the difference in that summer? Probably some of you are. But polio disappeared. And of course, Jonas Salk received the Nobel Prize. So that was the other outstanding achievement in the 50s. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Smith. It is hard to believe it's been 50 years since Martin Luther King gave that speech. It's just
I know. How
amazing to think it's been that long. And I might add, you mentioned polio, but one of the things that you mentioned was that there was no polio that next summer. Well, that happened to be the way it was for the most part in the United States, not all parts of the United States, but the United States. But throughout the world, polio is still there. And one of the thing about Rotary Clubs International is that that's what they are charged with, is the eradication of polio throughout the world. And there's only very few small pockets of polio left, so that 97% of all polio is eradicated at this point. So, and I can remember being in grammar school with 2 or 3 children in my class having polio.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, thank you. We're going to move on to the public communications portion of our meeting. Public communications is a time for people to address the council on items that are not on our agenda. For the most part, we cannot take any action on anything that you bring to our attention tonight, unless it's an emergency item. But if we're interested in further discussions of it, we will be talking about it, and we'll ask to have it placed on a future agenda. So I do have one public communication, and that's Peter LaFollette. Hello there, Peter.
Hi, thanks, Mayor Blatz. Good evening, everyone. And I'm speaking tonight on public safety signage. I'll be as brief as possible and hopefully as results-oriented as possible. I live at 999 East Ojai Avenue, the Whispering Oaks Complex. The driveway into the Whispering Oaks Complex is where cars whip in like they're still driving on the main roadway there. Twice I've had close calls, both walking and on a bicycle. And if I wasn't a young middle-aged person, and if I was a elderly person, I would not be standing in front of you to speak about it. We need a public pedestrian signs posted on both sides of that driveway. I spoke today with the Department of Public Works. They suggested 1, a study, 2, a meeting, 3, a grant, 4, a visit to site, and lastly, they said it was private property. It's not private property. It's actually a public-funded property. So the city, in conjunction, hopefully with the housing authority, can put something together very quickly. It's a liability issue. More importantly, it's a public safety issue involving potential injury and death. The manager there at Whispering Oaks Complex is Rosio, and they will be repaving the driveway soon at Whispering Oaks, so that would be a good time to install these signs. They're really important, and I'm not really too delighted about almost losing my life 2 times by cars whipping in much too quickly off of the Main Street Avenue. So thanks for your attention to this matter.
Thank you for bringing that to our attention, Peter. I have one other speaker's card, but it's for item 1C, which I will call off the consent calendar. Is there anyone else wishing to address us as far as public comment? Seeing no one, we'll move on to the consent calendar. We have a speaker's card on 1C, and then I'd like to briefly speak about 1E.
I'd also like to make some comments on 1E if I could.
Okay. Item 1C, we have Craig Beam that would like to address us on that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Thank you, Member Smith, for your recollections. I do remember that summer, and I had friends, as the mayor did, who suffered from polio. I'm here to comment on the lighting ordinance. I apologize for not having been involved in its formulation, but I've also written ordinances like this, and I've dealt with a lot of cities with dark sky ordinances. You have some serious issues here, not the least of which is the fact that in normal parlance, the emperor has no clothes here. You have something like, a list of many type of facilities that are subject to this, but 4 out of the 8 categories, parking lots, et cetera, are exempt because they're governmental property. The skate park, Sarzodi Park, the bowl, et cetera. I've flown over this area a number of times at night. As you know, I'm a pilot. Sometimes I'm going back and forth. You can see those areas from 10 to 15 miles away, and yet they're exempt. You also have a problem because I know you've attempted to not require grandfathering or retrofitting of existing facilities, but the opening line of the general requirements is that all outdoor light fixtures shall be installed and maintained in such a manner, et cetera, et cetera. And then you reference the lumen chart here. I live in a house that's built in mid-40s, okay? Right now, I'm suffering from city light pollution because I'm in a lighting and landscape maintenance district. I have a street light with a naked bulb that hangs down below a flat reflector and illuminates everybody for a half-block area in all 4 directions. Those are throughout the cities. Those are exempt. They're governmental properties. All similar lights on Park are exempt. All the 24 very high intensity lights in Zodi Park are exempt, and so forth. And yet it looks like, as it relates to individual homeowners, if my light bulb on my front porch, which is clearly substandard given the age of it, and the walkway, which is 40 feet to the street, says that I can't replace the light bulb with anything over 40 watts, I guarantee you that is dangerous. That is a dangerous condition of my property. And I really don't care to have my guests or invitees in danger. Now, I understand that I can put timers on those. My house, on a half-acre lot, has exactly 2 outdoor lights. The front porch and going into the back. The back one is on a proximity alarm. And by the way, our car was broken into in that area. The front one does not. I turn it off and on. I don't believe in leaving lights on outdoors at night. So I find this ordinance and the provisions in here seriously flawed as written, number one. Number two, I question our priorities. This city is number 10 out of 10 cities in this county in responding to the greenhouse gas reduction initiative of AB 32. Number 10 out of 10 cities. It virtually has no knowledge at all about water pollution issues in the county. It has infrastructure that's falling apart. The road that crossed my property has, in the middle of the pavement displacement, in the middle of the pavement, this high. And yet I watch maybe 40 people a day during the summertime walk down from the Iguana down Blanche, right past it, in the dark, except for the city street light. We have dangerous conditions of public property, and yet we're focusing on this. The Gables, where you pull in, and I've had 2 family members there, has 2 pole lights that shine down from an altitude about this. That's where you bring in your senior citizens in wheelchairs. That's where you have an ambulance, what have you. Those are illegal. I walk this town, which I love dearly, or I wouldn't raise these issues, almost daily. I mean, I'm back and forth from here to Soul Park constantly, both during the day and at night. I walk my dogs. Everywhere I look, I see both residences and commercial facilities that would not meet the requirements of this ordinance. And in many cases, I think, frankly, they're because of safety concerns. And I know that you've seen demonstrations that the lighting standards work fine, and yet I think you're going to find that you are not very convincing to the public, especially businesses and residential areas, where you've exempted so many things that truly are light pollution creating that are city activities. So I'd ask you, you're going to go forward for a year and take a look at this. I think you got to inventory the number of non-conforming lights you see. I think you'll be amazed at that. And move with reasonable caution and reasonable participation on the city's part to deal with its own problems, which I find throughout the city. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Beam. Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to address us on consent item C? Any comments by staff in response to Mr. Beam?
Well, I think one thing that we didn't really discuss when we introduced this is the streetlights. And you may recall that we have had some interaction with Edison, and those meetings are continuing, and we're looking at a way to, on a no-cost basis, change out over time the lights that don't conform with lights that do conform. So we're trying to get at this one step at a time.
All right, item number E.
Mayor Blatz,
Yes.
I have a question real quick on 1C. And this is just for staff. I recall that we were talking about how the city should be an example of this lighting ordinance. Do we have any plan, because we're talking about how we should change our light fixtures or just around government property, and and seeing if we could be example for our constituents. Is there any timeline for that, or do you recall that conversation?
That's a very good point, and I think we should put together a timeline and get back to you on that.
Because I do agree with Mr. Bream. I think that we should be the example, and we should start thinking about eliminating the light pollution in our facilities before we start enforcement on our residents. So,
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
I would agree with Councilwoman Lara, so I would really like to see what we can come up with in the way of potential grants or any number of things to improve the lighting of our facilities.
Any other comments?
I will comment. I've been vocal regarding the lighting ordinance for the time, all the time I've been on council. But where I am now is, I think we have a relatively mild-mannered lighting ordinance. And we have, it's not retroactive. We have 1-year plan for community outreach, for education, et cetera. And so I support the ordinance as it stands, and I understand we're going to look at it in a year to see how it's working.
Well, I think we're going to be looking at it throughout the year, in actuality. Any other comments? Okay, item E. I would just wanted to make a comment because it involves the appointments to the Building Appeals Board, which is an outcrop of the building code. And Mr. Clark, you said you wished to speak to that?
Yes, I just wanted to give a little bit more explanation as to why we're recommending that you appoint a board that's not going to meet that often. The duties of the Building Appeals Board are set forth in state code, and the primary duty is to hear appeals of decisions of the building official. And in our city and in most cities, those appeals are very rare, so I don't expect that that will happen too often. And in fact, in the time that I've been here, I can only think of a couple occasions where there might have been an appeal. But when we met with the Planning Commission and we talked about the building code, one of the things that was very apparent is that there was a lack of public confidence in our administration of the building code, especially when we were proposing changes to the building code. And so having a citizen-based appeals board was determined not just by staff, but also by the Planning Commission to be a very important step in gaining the confidence of the public in administering the code appropriately. Now, I should say that there are a couple advisory things that we can get this board involved in. For example, when we do the second unit compliance program, and if we do go forward with building code changes, that this would be the natural place to take those.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Councilwoman Platt.
This is a little off topic, but I would really like to have a report on how we're coming along on the amnesty program in the near future, if we could, so we know what's going on and when it's going to be implemented.
I think it would be a good idea for us to convene that appeals board for nothing more than, I'm sure they have to be sworn in, and to perhaps give them an overview of their responsibilities as it has been promulgated by the state building code, and talk a little bit with the board as to what we're expecting of them and what they should be looking forward to. So I would very much like to participate in that meeting, and I think we should do it as soon as possible. The appointments that come before the council tonight on the consent calendar, the reason I wanted to pull it off is I wanted to give each of those members recognition. Mayor Pro Tem Strobel and myself interviewed each of them in our selection process. We're recommending that Bob Daddy, Dale Hansen, Tom Farmer, Wendy Hilgers, William Ryrick all be appointed to the Building Appeals Board with their terms expiring August 13, 2017. And we want to thank each of those individuals for coming forward and volunteering to serve on that board. It's very important that we have as much community involvement. It's one of the reasons that we wanted to have a public member on our finance committee. We want there to be as much transparency in the way that this city operates as possible. And the only way we can do it is through people like yourselves that come to these meetings and give us your input. And for people, Dale's in the audience. Thank you, Dale. Oh, there he is. Mr. Wyrick's back there. Volunteering for these really important boards and committees. So thank you very much. Anything else on the consent calendar to discuss? All right, then I'll entertain a motion.
I'll move to approve the consent calendar 1A through 1G.
Second.
Okay, any further discussion?
Yes, I am very sorry.
Okay.
Item A, I noticed that on there's several pages, page 1-11 and page 1-14, and 1-18, Rico USA color copy overages. And they amount to, one of them is $600. It's almost $2,000 of overages in color copy. And I was wondering if, Mr. Clark, have you considered locking out a color that people have to get permission to use color, or what's going on here? That's quite an overage.
I'll be glad to take a look.
Yeah. Please do, thank you.
Anything else? Okay, we have a motion and it's been seconded. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Laura,
Yes.
Clapp,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
Strobel,
Yes.
Blatz.
Yes. And thank you again for all the members of the public that provided your input. Moving on to our public hearings, we have one public hearing this evening. It's item number 2 on our agenda. Revisions to the Public Art Code, Municipal Code, Title 4, Chapter 16, Public Arts. Mr. Clark.
And I will turn it over to Mr. McCleary to make the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. This before you tonight is accumulation of many years of effort by the members of the Arts Commission as well as staff, but credit really should go to the members of the Arts Commission. We are asking the council to introduce an ordinance this evening that would put forth some revisions to the Public Art Code as it's currently found in the Ojai Municipal Code. And to that extent, we're asking the council to make 2 actions. One, to accept the determination that under CEQA guidelines, a review is not required because there's no possibility that the ordinance will have a significant impact on the environment. And secondly, we're recommending that the council introduce the ordinance, which would amend Article 2 of Chapter 16 of Title 4 of the Ohio Municipal Code related to the public art program. Before I go any further along, I wanted to, despite the fact that this has gone through and been vetted by numerous committees and 2 commissions and staff, we still found a couple of corrections to the draft that was published in the packet. I believe you all have a handout this evening that's titled Draft 81213 REV at the top. And if I could, before I go into the staff report, if I could just indicate what those changes are. If you would be willing to turn to page 2 of the handout. We missed part of the strikeout there in the language. So that section 416-201B, subparagraph 3, should read, nurturing alternative sources for cultural and artistic outlets improves the environment, image, and character of the community, semicolon. So that's the one change. A little farther down on that page, we have the definition for the Committee to Approve Public Art, CAPA, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. There was, the second sentence had a couple of issues with it, and it also did not accurately track to the remainder of the ordinance. So that second sentence there has been corrected to show that the committee shall be responsible for conceptual and final reviews of artworks both public and private, and recommendations to the Arts Commission for final review and approval or denial. And the next change on page 7 at the bottom, again, we accidentally struck out a word that needed to remain in the copy. So that section 4-16-213, paragraph A, should read, any artwork being placed on private property as part of the public arts program shall be a one-of-a-kind piece conceived by and executed through an artist, period.
Mr. McCleary, since we're on this section, on page 3,
Yes?
subsection G, Public Arts Program, subsection I, Public Arts Program, that's still duplicated.
Wait a minute.
Are we in different places?
No, I see it. G and I.
It's, we have a strike-through, but subsection G and I are both Public Arts Program and have the same verbiage.
Yeah.
Oh, I see. Thank you for pointing that out.
Yeah, we need to lose the second one and turn responsible party into I. Oh, wait, no. What is that? What is that? I, what's that?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, what we did with that was, besides changing some definitions, is we eliminated the letters, so we just defined things alphabetically. That was one of the changes we made here. We took out all the lettering and because it was out of order.
Okay,
We simply just redefined
My
it.
comment isn't about the lettering, it's
Correct.
about the duplication.
It's just redundant, so the second one should be stricken.
Right. Okay.
Right.
Thank you, Mr. Fletcher. If there are no further questions on the revisions as presented tonight, I'll proceed to the staff report. So as I stated at the introduction, this has been a long time coming. This project actually began prior to my tenure with serving as the liaison to the Arts Commission. And there are a couple of things that are really driving this. One, the current code does not refer to the committee that we have been using to vet public art projects, and that was called the Public Art Review Committee. It went by the acronym of PARC, or PARC, which in and of itself is a bit confusing. So the city has been operating under PARC for a number of years. However, that does not match what's in the city municipal code. So that is a problem right there. What we are proposing is to codify a committee called CAPA, the Committee to Approve Public Art, that would essentially serve a function similar to what PARC had done over the years. However, with the exception that PARC only dealt with public art for private developments, and the CAPA would be a reviewing body for both private and public art projects. The recommended makeup of CAPA is similar to PARC, however, it is different. PARC right now has one member of the Arts Commission, one member of the Planning Commission, and one member of the arts community. The proposed CAPA would include 3 members of the Arts Commission appointed by the Commission, one member of the Planning Commission appointed by that Commission, and one member who is a member of the public who is knowledgeable about art, who would also be appointed by the Arts Commission. And as you stated, CAPA would review both public and private art projects and then make a recommendation to the Arts Commission for final approval. The other concern that's driving the changes to the code, and I think this is probably the issue that is from the perspective of the Arts Commission, the portion of the code that needed a little more teeth into it, is to change the timing on when the developer has to come in with their art concept and get that approved. Currently, you do not have to put your public art up until it is time to get your final certificate of occupancy. What we are proposing here is that it would come much earlier in the process. We feel that this process, making it earlier, will not only benefit the developer, but also the city, and that it will lead to better artwork that is more well-planned and better integrated with the architecture. There's been a tendency among some projects to wait until late in the process to come up with an art concept. That's difficult because it sometimes just leads to what is known as plop art, or coming up with some art concept that maybe isn't very well thought out and doesn't really fit into the project or maybe even the character of the community. And of course, at that point, you're late in the game. The developer is eager to get their project open and occupied, and that puts the city and the commissions in a difficult position of perhaps having to choose between accepting artwork that they might not feel really meets the spirit of the ordinance, or they would be holding up a project from being able to open and begin providing benefits to the community and that type of thing. So what we're asking is that the change in the code would require that this be done much earlier in the process, prior to the point where they would get their building permit issued. So that is the recommended remedy for that. Another significant change as we were going through the code was the current code does not require public art for either public or private schools. The Arts Commission would like to eliminate that requirement. However, we do not believe that we can require public art for public schools when they're doing a project that involves their educational curriculum. If they were building housing or doing something different, it could apply. The Commission is supportive of eliminating the exemption for private educational institutions, and so if this is approved, private schools would be required to provide public art for future projects. I also wanted to point out two members of the commission that are here this evening. Chair Christine Golden, who I know you heard from earlier, and also Commissioner Susan Stinsmulen-Amond. Commissioner Stinsmulen-Amond has, I think it's fair to say, has taken a lead role in pushing this through, and we appreciate all the commissioners' input and support as we work through this process. Be happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes. Mayor Pro Tem Strobel.
Okay. A clarification. In the staff report, page 2-3, under fiscal impact, it says the city may continue to exempt itself from the requirements to provide public art for city projects as desired. And that is not the way I read the ordinance. And I don't want to thumb through it to find all the place. Well, I can give you one, page 2-7, under, at the top of the page, and this is about exemptions. Number 2 says, projects undertaken by any agency of the state, county, and the Ojai City School District or any government entity other than the city. And I noticed that type of wording throughout the ordinance. I'm basically in support of what the Art Commission is attempting to do, but there's a lot of little cleanup work I think still needs to be done in the ordinance, and they're minor things, but like when I read other than the city, that tells me that where is the city's option to decline? So anyway, I noticed that throughout.
Okay, take a look at that.
Mr. McCleary, is it the intent of the drafters that the city be exempt from the requirement of public art, or is it the intention to make the city required to do public art? because as pointed out by Mayor Pro Tem Strobel, it's definitely ambiguous in the
Yeah,
code as written.
I believe the intent was to still allow the option for the city to opt out from the projects, but,
Okay, yes,
please.
sure,
Susan Stinsmula Naaman.
yeah.
I don't have the copy that you have in front of you, but on 416.206, requirement to provide artwork, in B, it says, "Nothing herein shall restrict the city council from waiving the requirements of this article in whole or in part." In other words, the city has an option to not do public art if it deems that the budget for the project is not sufficient or it would be better for the community. Like, for instance, the skateboard park. There was a very small budget and a lot of community money was given to that. The Arts Commission said, you don't have to do it. We understand, you don't have to provide public art. We voted on it and said, because of the financial situation and all that you've done to make this happen, you don't have to do it. They opted to do it, but it wasn't, the city is a leader for, yes, the city should do public art. We are the public. We should step forward and say, we are in support of the arts. I did not ever think that this ordinance only gave an option for the city to not do it if they deemed it for whatever reason not to. But basically, we're leading the pack of all development in the city, and art is a part of it.
Okay. So that option, Susan, that you just referred to, the city council could waive the requirement for public art for any project, including its own. That was what your intent was?
Well, no, you're just the public. I mean, it's required for private development.
Well, but that's not what it says.
Yeah, but it doesn't say that.
Okay,
Mr.
well,
Mayor?
can you show me where that is?
Yes, Miss.
Maybe
Yes,
I could
Mr.
weigh in here.
Fletcher.
In our packet,
the only-
it's on page 2-7, it's section 4-16.206, subsection B.
If I may, the only changes in the code are those that are stricken out or underlined here. That language has always been in the municipal code.
That's true.
So that's not a change. And it's important to keep in mind whether it was the conversation the gentleman spoke earlier about the lighting ordinance or issues like a public art code. These are regulations that the city under its police power imposes upon other entities. It just says, I'm talking about as a matter of law here, the city can't impose it on itself. We're exercising police power on other entities and other properties. So when you adopt a regulatory ordinance like this, by its nature, it doesn't apply to the city because it's publicly owned property. We don't zone or regulate our own property. You manage that as the legislative body, and you adopt your own policies on how city property is managed. Because for one thing, there's no one to enforce it. We are required to get building permits for our own properties and things like that. So the decision by the city whether to include a public art component to any project it does is a policy decision the city council makes when it approves a project. And so this by its nature, when we say exempt to other agencies other than the city, is because we're recognizing that those other governmental agencies are beyond our jurisdiction. It's not a policy decision to exempt them. We don't have jurisdiction over county, state, or federal projects, and that's why that exemption's there. But that language has always been in the code. This is not a change. It's just been the nature of it. So you do public art on the governmental side for our own properties as a policy decision, not as a legislative action.
Okay, well, the part that it seems as though Mayor Pro Tem Strobel and I were referring to is on page 2-7.
Correct.
It's 4-16.206B. Nothing herein shall restrict the city council from waiving the requirements of this article. This article is the entire statute.
Correct.
In whole or in part, that's public and private, with respect to any covered project otherwise subject to the provisions of this article, provided that the council determines that the responsible party has entered into an agreement with the city, providing for the responsible party's acquisition or installation of artwork in connection with the development of the project which addresses the goals and aims of this article in a manner equal to or more favorable to the city than that which would have been achieved by the strict compliance of this article.
Correct.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a comment.
Yes.
And that is, I want to say up front that just because something exists in the last ordinance that was approved by the council doesn't mean it needs to continue that way. Just because it was approved at some point in time does not necessarily mean that this council might better see fit to change it.
You're absolutely right. I was pointing out that that language isn't something that's coming from the Arts Commission to you as a recommendation.
Right.
That's been in the code.
Right.
So it's not among the things that the commission was proposing to you. And if I clarify the question, the mayor's question on that, that simply is a provision that, and I think it's done primarily for constitutional reasons, to allow you on a case-by-case basis to waive the strict application of the code as to a private development if they provide some other, as you find here, by substantial evidence, some equal contribution towards art. It's there for that unique situation that you don't want to or have a hard time applying the strict regulations here. You can enter into an agreement with a private property owner to do something else, as long as what they're doing substantially gives you what you're trying to get through the public art program.
But, hold on. But then the next sentence, Mr. Fletcher, says the city council may also waive requirements for covered projects, which are also city projects, when the council determines it would be in public interest to do so. Well, that are also city projects. I guess that's the part that seems to be also city projects to what?
I don't know. It could be, for example, now you might have say the city is doing a public-private affordable housing project, or so the city's participating in a project that's a private development. I don't actually know. But that's just as you start from I just want to start saying you start from the legal principle that these regulations aren't imposed on the city, just as a matter of law as it starts. And you could write a lot of legislation better than sometimes it's initially drafted.
Councilwoman Clapp.
Clearly, it needs some cleanup. So I suggest that I'm not a fan of committees, but would love to maybe have Councilwoman Strobel and Mayor Blatz or another council member or Councilwoman Strobel solely, if council's pleasure, to go over it with maybe Mr. McClary and Susan to clean it up and then bring it back again. Because Councilwoman Strobel's particularly good at dissecting these kinds of documents. She's a master, and I think that it would be really valuable for her to do so.
Let me just say.
Mr. Mayor.
Sorry.
Something that I would, all right, my concept of this proposed ordinance is that it's to get the art component of a project handled up front so that applicant, city, everyone knows what it's going to cost, what it's going to require, et cetera. That's one of the reasons for us doing this.
That's absolutely correct.
If I'm incorrect, well, I seem to be just chewing on this, but I don't see the city as being exempt. So with that in mind, maybe within this or somewhere, we should define what we mean when we refer to a city project, because I'm sure that street overlays is not one of the things that you would have in mind for, but it is a project.
Yeah, that would not be considered a covered project under the code, but yes, it would be a city project.
Is that already in here? Is the definite? I know that I read the covered projects, but is it, as far as the city is concerned, what is considered a project that this ordinance would apply to?
Well, if you look here on 2-7, housing projects for low, moderate income persons and families are exempt.
Well, I know that,
Yeah.
but I'm thinking now specifically for the city of Ojai. What projects would be suitable for an art component? Because all of our capital improvements, street overlays, everything, all those are projects.
Correct.
So is it building, or is it specifically something like the skate park?
Well, it's the park, that Ojai entry park that turned into the,
Club Vista?
well, Club Vista was a first example of development with the city in conjunction with private, that would have required public art, but people, we were just revving up on that, and so people. Yeah, well, yes, she already said Libby Bowl. Ojai, what is it, the Rotary Community, Rotary
Park?
Rotary Park. That went through with public art because people were on.
Arcade Plaza.
It wasn't.
Yeah.
Or Arcade
Oh, the Arcade Plaza, sure, yeah, that was before the code was written as well.
There are many examples of.
Yeah, I understand that. What I'm saying is that we haven't defined what those projects that this would apply to are within the city, because virtually everything we do is a project.
Well, if it's over I think it's sort of the same. I mean, if you did a renovation on this building and it was over 300,000, you would want to do
I
public art.
understand that. I'm thinking of things like our street, our
Fulton extension.
overlays,
Well, isn't
our
that
Fulton extension.
excluded in there?
I think we're
Where does
talking
it
about
tell
the
me that
legal
isn't
document
included?
and the definitions within the legal document and what you're talking about, which is back to my suggestion that we clean it up. I think that's what we need to do. You know.
It's-
So, and Mr. Mayor, maybe you have a suggestion on how we could do that, so we can move on.
Yeah. Well, there's
.org.
ambiguities, there's ambiguities in there. And I think you always have to allow the city to exempt any project, including private projects. You always want to be able to do that. There's got to be a reason that if somebody that has a project that it just doesn't fit, that the city council has to be able to exempt those projects, including projects of their own. But it's more of an option on the city's part to include public art than it would be a requirement. Because if you looked at it as Mayor Pro Tem Strobel is saying, we have a project to put in a, Fulton Street extension. That's a project. Did we have to put public art in there? No. So that needs to be defined if we indeed want public projects to have to be consistent with the code with requirements to public art. So I think we need to at least get a little tighter with the definitions.
Would you like to include projects like that?
Well, I think that's something projects like what? Like the street?
Street improvements.
No, we wouldn't. If we resurface Ojai Avenue, it doesn't require public art, but it's a project. So I think we have to, say that projects that may are in the nature of public works projects. What's the council's pleasure? Do you believe that as a general rule, even though we can exempt ourselves from the requirement, do you believe that city projects such as the remodeling of the museum, or if we did something with another building, this building,
Mr. Mayor?
is it the council's
Yes.
pleasure that the city be required to provide public art?
Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
but, yeah, I think defining what we mean by projects that lend itself to public art.
Okay.
And perhaps using the word project is too loose.
And even if we exempt ourselves, the city of Ojai exempts itself, is there anything to prohibit us from unexempting ourselves on specific projects?
If I may, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I think I think we're missing an initial point. This again, I'm not addressing the issue from a policy standpoint of whether the city ought to be including public art in its capital projects. That this is just a legal issue. That in an ordinance like this, it as a matter of law, it never applies to the city. Because this is a land use regulation that you're imposing, and it's really covered by the definition of covered project. The existing language says a covered project means all new residential development of 5 or more units, and all commercial, manufacturing, institutional recreation, village mixed use only, unless residential portion consists of 5 or more units, and the remodeling or reconstruction up to $300,000. By its nature, it applies to private development. It just, and I think if you want, trying to, and that's just how the law is today, this is the ordinance is today. If you want to create some sort of a legal obligation on the city's part to include capital art in its capital projects, it really belongs in a different place other than this ordinance. And then as a matter, I mean, we're not a charter city, so there's no way you can bind a future city council. They can change that at any time. Only if it's in a charter can you bind future city council. So that policy about how we deal with the city projects is something that just simply is done someplace other than in this ordinance. That's the point I'm trying to make. And trying to redraft the ordinance to address that, I think is a lot of, is not where the best place for you to put your resources. If there's some specific language, I mean, I'm not here to, say that the ordinance as originally drafted is the best ordinance in the world. If you want to make some further clarifications on just cleaning it up as better legislation, that's fine. That was not in my mission on working with the staff on this. So, but I think that I just want to let you know from the legal perspective, dealing with this legislation, that's the city being subject to this is simply not, as a matter of law, not part of it. It's not within its purview.
Right. So the real thrust of this ordinance is that we're going to place the requirements for the public art selection and approval closer to the beginning of the project, and we're going to take an exemption away for private schools. Is that an accurate statement?
Yes.
Okay.
Mayor Blatz?
Yes.
And also how the committee's created.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
That's also a significant
Okay.
change. Thank you, Councilmember.
Well, what I would like, because Mr. Fletcher hasn't gone through the ordinance specifically looking at language that might be able to be cleaned up, I just as soon have him go through it and see if you can find some, more precise language, or
I'd be happy to work with the Mayor Pro Tem on that.
that'd be great.
Fantastic.
Okay.
If they're willing, yeah. And I'll see if I can make this my last comment on this item. The bottom line is, it doesn't matter how many times I've seen an ordinance. When it comes to us in our council packet, I read it as though I have never seen it before. And so I catch all of these inconsistencies. And that's the way I believe we should be doing our ordinances.
Okay? All right, this is a public hearing. Thank you. Is there anyone in the audience? I don't have any speakers cards.
Susan, I think, wants to say
Right,
something.
I'll come back to you, Susan.
I just want to say that any changes that we're proposing tonight from the, instigated by the Arts Commission does not sound like a lawyer wrote it. I mean, because we don't those whole swaths of language were not really what we were even capable of totally understanding.
Yeah.
But the whole process, we just want the process to tie in with what is actually happening when private development happens or public development, so the process makes sense and it's in coordination with the ordinance. And that's basically what we're talking about and what Steve has so eloquently described.
You've spent hours and hours working on this, so thank you very much.
Thank you for your positive response.
That doesn't go unnoticed, believe me. Is there anyone in the audience wishing to address the council on this? I don't have any speakers card. No? Then I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved. Oh,
Okay.
second.
Bring it back. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, I'll bring it back to council for comments or further questions of staff. Is the direction in it that we'd like Mr. Fletcher to go through it and see if he can
with council,
Just
with Mayor
clean up the
Pro Tem.
language a little
Mayor
bit,
Pro Tem
working
Strobel's
with
input?
Mayor Pro
Okay.
Tem.
Okay.
Mayor Blatz, I have a couple of questions also
Okay.
for Steve and the commission in regards to formulating the committee caps. I just want some more clarity of why we're combining the private and the public versus how it was, and why we're adding 3 commissioners and having an approve an at-large artisan. Just because I just want to make sure that I could support that.
Would you like to answer that, Susan?
If you'd like me to answer.
All I was going to be doing was communicating the Arts Commission sentiment, so probably better to come directly from a commissioner. So Susan, I'll let you.
It's actually a good question. The whole idea behind CAPA is the original ordinance had it so that the Arts Commission approved all projects.
Mm-hmm.
At the time that the ordinance was first passed, there was concern that there would be too much time and inconvenience for developers if they had to wait for an Arts Commission meeting every time they wanted to make a move with their project. So we were told that we had to set up a quick action committee, which was Park. Now, which is why it's not partially why it's not in the ordinance. So that's somebody from the from planning, so that there would be an eye there for anything that would come up that maybe they would report to the planning commission about the arts projects, and the arts commissioner, the arts representative would relate to the arts commission what had happened at these meetings. But basically, Park was approving everything, and it was, because of the process, it wasn't getting the best results. And when the Arts Commission saw what had happened, in some cases, they were upset that they did not have a voice, and rightfully so. There is the Public Art Subcommittee, and that committee is, as all committees are, usually comprised of people most knowledgeable in those fields. And so it's thought that if we have 3 people on the preferably or supposedly, it's not stipulated as such, that from the Public Arts Committee, then you would have people that were knowledgeable about the ordinance. I mean, I think the other 2 people, I'm not even sure they ever read it, So it was people that are really committed, so that the Arts Commission's constituency and then the Planning Commission and somebody from the field at large, there would be a real dialogue about what is being presented to them, and there would be some knowledge about how the procedure goes and what public art is and what it can look like. It can be, so that CAPA then will be the fast action review, and they will, after they have hopefully 2 meetings, one at the very beginning when it's just in design development, that developer has to come with at least saying, okay, we're going to have public art in the east side of our courtyard or building or something, that they have to commit right up front. So they'll go to the CAPA to say, this is what we're thinking of, this is the artist we're thinking of, and right away they can get feedback from CAPA, and then they go away and then come back with their final proposal, and then that is recommended to the Arts Commission, and the Arts Commission approves it or not.
And great, I could see that the amount of work you guys have done to create the subcommittee and implement it into the municipal code. You guys have, it's tremendous amount of work. And it's great to hear that there's commitment, efficiency. We always want to make it not take so long for some developer to implement an art. My only concern here is that I feel there's an unbalance. There's really, with 3 commissioners being on that committee, instead of having just in that large, 1 commissioner and 1 planning, I just feel like it's heavily swayed to the commission approval. And I'm not saying the commissioner wouldn't be fair, but I don't know if we could get input from Joe, if there could be some legal issue in the future that we could proceed of how this committee is formulated. I just want it to be balanced more than anything. That's what I'm trying to get at. And I appreciate that the commissioners want to have their input and to have only one commissioner there. It feels a little bit on one side. If you, I just see, I don't know if there could be potential legal ramifications for that.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, no, from a legally, no, there's, and it kind of can make sense from the idea that this is the issue is primarily art. Therefore, having a committee made up predominantly of members of the Arts Commission makes sense, and the planning commissioner is there to add some voice from the land use planning standpoint, but since it's an art process, it makes sense, actually.
Okay.
There's 7 commissioners, not 5, on the Arts Commission, so it's only 3 out of 7.
Oh, no, I get that. I understand that. My only concern was the fact that it's you got 3 art commission, and then you got an at-large that's selected by the commissioners, and then you got a planning commissioner. So I just wanted it to be a little bit more balanced, more fairness. Not saying that our commission is not going to be, but potentially, what if the planning commissioner doesn't agree with 3 of the commissioners? I mean, it's kind of.
They are the artists. Everyone on the Arts Commission is an artist, so.
Yeah, and then it's so subjective of what's art. So that's another issue that I have. It's so subjective, and I don't know. I think we're getting into a little bit of a kind of muddy situation. So I kind of want to eliminate the muddy situation, and I don't know if that's possible. But I absolutely agree that a committee has to be formulated for there to be more efficiency, so that the project could be approved a lot quicker than going through the art commission meeting and waiting, which happens once a month. So I absolutely agree that.
It's just like the people who know about public art are invested. They really care about it. And it's still not going to be a clear process. But when you have people that don't, it's really hard to, I don't know. It's not, rocket science or anything.
Well,
it's just that we felt that it would be, we can't have 4 people because then there's no vote for recommendation. So if we have 5, it's, I mean, it could be discussed or changed, or this is, yeah. I mean, what am I saying? Oh, of course.
Well, trust me when I say this, got a heck of a lot of discussion at our commission meetings. This very thing was one of the hardest things that we had to move forward on, is trying to figure out how to do this, because what's happened in the past is those of us who serve as commissioners have been approached by the public and who would like to know, well, why did that go there, or why did this go here? And our answer was, well, we had nothing to do with it. We feel that you have appointed us and given us the obligation, the charge to have public art go up in the city that is of quality and that reflects, as you look in the ordinance, it even talks about how it should reflect what our city is, and you've entrusted that to us. We want to have that voice. We don't feel we had that voice when it was one artist, one planning commissioner, and one person's at-large person. It wasn't working. We really feel that by putting 3 of the art commissioners who are experts in public art, Susan is an expert in public art, so are the other 2 that are on that committee, that you're going to get the best bang for your buck, that you've put experts there, not to vote down the person at large or the planning commissioner member, but to help them understand and to get feedback from them. So it isn't like an adversarial kind of thing where it's the art, 3 on the art and 1 over here and whatever. This is a group working together. I don't know if that helps, Savaro.
Yeah, it does help, and I don't question your credibility and our faith to our commissioners. I try not to envision the worst case scenario, but what if there's a planning commissioner that is upright, isn't convinced with the 3 other art commission? I just don't want there to be, I want there to be a fair balance, in other words. And because that's my only concern in this committee. And I'm not saying you guys, well, probably the commissioners on there would be able to resolve that, but it just adds a little.
Yeah, I hear you.
Yeah,
Little
I think
distaste.
you're making an assumption that all three of the arts commissioners will say this work is terrific, which may not at all be the case.
Yeah, you're
They may
absolutely
think
right.
that two of the artists will say this is terrific, and one will say it doesn't suit the project, though. So I think there's a big assumption there that all three arts commissioners who are on it will agree that this particular piece is the one they want. I think that is a big assumption. And so it's not a perfect world, so I think what you have done, though, is a better model than we've had. And of course, if you find it's not working for some reason, we could change it. So by no means do I think all three arts commissions will agree what is. There won't be like a school of the three arts commissioners saying, yes, this is the best work, and the other two will not. It could easily be another way.
No, you're absolutely right. There could be a lot of
And
scenarios.
it does come back to the commission of the whole before it is approved or denied. So it isn't like that committee has even a final say in it. And that, we really went around on that because not everybody was real happy with it coming back for everyone to have a say. And the planning commissioner that sits there is such a critical person from our point of view because they're going to give us input about things that we're not experts on, like the installation of the piece and safety regulations and all kinds of things. So it isn't, I think it's a different animal than the one that you're kind of thinking it is. That way that committee would work.
Also, I want to say that the way it's set up now, the Planning Commission is actually going to see the projects that come through before the Arts Commission or before CAPA. So in fact, the Planning Commission will be more informed, and that representative will see it from the beginning and will be a voice of how it was presented to the Planning Commission when they come and serve on CAPA.
Okay. All right. Well, I don't know how my fellow council members think, and if they think that this committee would be good. I mean, I'm supportive. I just see there's so many different scenarios. I just want to make that point clear because I don't.
I get it.
I want to make it fair, especially for a developer too. So.
Thank you, Councilman Lara. Any other comments?
Before they sit down, come back, trio. You guys are guys are doing good. Under covered projects on 2-5, institutional recreation is mentioned and institutional construction. Would you tell me what you have in mind with the use of that institutional recreation? It's under what would have been M, the next to the last, under covered projects.
I would refer to any interpretation of the municipal code to the city attorney. This was not a paragraph that we worked on or proposing any changes to, so.
Okay, but my question is, here's my bottom line. If we have a reason to use terms like institutional recreation, then let's do it. If we have it in here because it's commonplace, but we don't really know what it means, let's don't use it. So that's my question. What is the intent with the use of institutional recreation? What is that?
I think we'll discuss and figure that out.
We'll discuss.
My first reading is, and I don't know if there's a difference between commercial recreation and institutional recreation, but I was thinking like the tennis club or the athletic club, not public recreation, private recreational facilities. I guess, yeah, and in full defense of the commission, this was not something, they took on the issue they're concerned with, and the idea is this is everything, all private development, except, is how, and normally, and I've written these for other communities, normally what you accept is, of course, governmental entities, and then usually either it's educational facilities or housing projects or something where cost becomes a big issue. And if I could add one other point, we were discussing how the selection of the art. It is the most difficult thing when you draft a public art ordinance. And what I have found always in the end of the game, what you're trying to do is not try to legislate good taste, because I think also as a matter of law, we can't do that. The purpose is to create a process to make the developer or whoever's building the art can include those components and consider those issues that are important to generate quality art. Not in whether in the end, there is a speech issue, the element of free speech in this. In the end, it's not, geez, I really like, a Mediterranean style, or I like, modern art, or I like modern architecture. It's not a matter of taste. It's that the money's been spent. It's a legitimate artist. It's visible. It has permanence, and it has artistic relevance. And then everything else is supposed to be up to the developer. And I can tell you where it's worked well in the communities where the property owner has gotten fully engaged in the public art project. They end up spending 2 and 3 times the budget because they get so engrossed in the project of being an art patron, and you get fantastic investments when it works right. And I have a lot of experiences where the developers went way above and beyond what they had to do because they got very engaged in this process. We engaged them to get the art consultant and get the artist early and really envision this art as part of their project and as part of the community. And they go nuts with it, and you get some fantastic pieces of art in the process.
Okay, that answers the institutional recreation and institutional construction part. I have one more question. When we use the CAPA, and incidentally, I like that, CAPA, are there overlapping responsibilities specifically to a project? Is there overlapping responsibilities between CAPA and a public art jury? Is that what it is? Public art jury?
The jury is...
Or is that two complete and separate?
They're separate. The jury is a process for choosing the artist or the artwork. But that would be a process that would be before the concept came to CAPA or before it went to the Arts Commission for final approval.
Okay. So they both function. We have a project. This is Project A. The public art jury and CAPA would both have a function for that. You see why I'm confused here?
Yeah, mostly a public art jury would be used in a public art project, like a city project. Like, we had a public art jury that we called together to be the jury, because you want to be much more public about the choosing of art for public, like Libby Bowl.
Right.
So we got, the constituency of the public art jury is written here of members of certain, member of the city, somebody that's involved from the community, the member of the design team, an artist, arts professionals and administrators from other cities, so that we have a complete 7-person panel that would choose. You'd have a public art process where you would send out to locally and nationally for artists to submit for this project. It would be described. People submit, you select maybe 3 to 5 finalists. Those finalists are paid a modest amount to come up with specific proposals for the site. The public art jury is assembled to choose those artists. Those artists go away another month and a half, 2 months. The artists come back. The public art jury chooses the artists with the final say, I believe, by the Arts Commission. They recommend to the Arts Commission, but it's meant to be a much more community-involved, more, dynamic.
Example of that,
Trimpen was chosen through the public art jury. But there were 3 finalists, and they were all excellent artists.
Okay. Then where does CAPA come in?
CAPA is mostly for private development, but, even a public art project, unless it's big, and very, people in the community are talking about it, we're stirring up energy and excitement about it, that's when you want to have a very democratic process and have representatives from
Okay, got it.
wide a swipe as you can. CAPA does everything else. in terms of reviewing and recommending. The Arts Commission decides.
And Mr. Mayor, when Mr. Fletcher and I get together, I would like Steve McCleary to be there, please.
Okay. Anything else?
Just one more thing about the school is I'm curious to see why the staff doesn't recommend us to strike that language, and the commission wants us to strike the language which will allow us to basically have the private or public schools have artwork.
Because we don't have land use regulatory control over the school district.
Okay.
As long as it's ever educational. The same thing as our zoning, they don't go through the building permit process, they go to the state architect for all their building projects. And so we don't have land use control over any educational facility.
Okay.
So we can't require them to do it.
So legally, we can't.
Yes, not in our jurisdiction.
Okay.
All right, so do we need anything other than continuing this to a future agenda? No. Okay. And you've got direction as to what we're going to do?
Mr. Mayor, I think since this was a public hearing, we need to continue. Now, you've closed the hearing, which is fine, so bring it back for deliberation, but we should have it to a date certain.
Yeah, okay. When do you want to put it on? Mr. Clark, when do you think?
October 8th.
Okay. Then this matter will be continued for a further public hearing to October the 8th. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to item number 3, discussion items. This is the report on potential revisions to the city's building height limits. Mr. Clark?
Thank you, Mayor, members of the City Council. You had referred the issue of potentially lowering the building height to the Planning Commission for their review and comment, and they did review it. And as you can see from their minutes, they made 3 specific recommendations. First, in single-family zones, it is not feasible to drop the height requirement from 30 foot to 25 foot because of the architectural considerations. Second, in the non-residential zones, they would like to leave the code as it's written at 30 and 35 feet for different zones, and not to specify 2 or 3 story. And as you may know, in those zones, 2-story is not specified. It's open just to the height limit. And then they did recommend that if a single-story residence is proposed that's taller than 20 feet, it should be subject to design review. And I think part of the consideration of the commission was that they felt that they could control mass and bulk that is in excess of that fits our community through the design review process. And these projects that go to this height would be subject to design review, so they have that tool to do it. So that's the Planning Commission's input, and this is on the agenda for your review and direction.
Okay. I was the liaison to the Planning Commission when they discussed this. And as you know, I'm one of the ones that had broached the idea of setting our height limit at 25 feet. And after a lengthy discussion by the Planning Commission, they thought that our ordinance as it was worded right now was perfectly acceptable. I did appreciate Mr. Clark's research that you recently provided with regard to Saratoga and Encinitas, where they had a 26-foot height limit, but allowed for additional height of 4 feet or so with regard to architectural designs for roofs and gables and things like that. And that's more in tune with the way I think. But I'll tell you, the Planning Commission, and with the construction and the architectural expertise it has, really felt that the ordinance as we currently have it is fine. My only concern is that within that 30 or 35 foot height limit, that it gives us too much of an opportunity for a 3rd story in areas of the city that we may not want them. So that's my comment on it. And if any other members of the council have questions of staff, I welcome you to ask.
I'd like to hear from the public.
Okay. This is a discussion item, but I'm hoping that somebody has comments about it out there. There's no speakers cards, but Dale, why don't you come forward?
I can't tell you how many times I didn't sell a house because it was a two-story looking down in the backyard. With a two-story, you can install certain landscaping. But with a three-story, or something that goes up high enough for that, you take away a person's privacy. And I don't know, I wasn't at the Planning Commission meeting, and I'm sorry that I might, maybe you're not talking about that sort of thing, but I really hope we don't move into three-story possibility because it really cuts down on privacy. And any homeowner in this city should be here talking against it because it's not what we want, I don't think. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor, you know,
Yes.
I probably should have clarified when I made the report that for the residential zones, we do have a two-story limit. So it's
Right.
30 feet,
But two
but
stories
no
at
more than
30
two
feet.
stories. Right.
Right.
In the non-residential zones, it's just a height limit.
Right. Anyone else wishing to address us? No? You sure? Okay,
Mr. Mayor,
I'll bring it back to council.
Mr. Mayor,
Yeah.
I have a question for Dale. Dale,
Dale?
could you come up to the podium again? Did you say you've had trouble selling houses because there were two stories looking down and no property?
Yeah, but you know, with most two-story places, you can have like certain kinds of vegetation, landscaping, whatever that protects it. But when you get up higher than that, I mean, I'm happy to hear this is not for residential areas because that was my concern.
Right.
But and sometimes even with two stories, if that building is close, there's not much you can do anyway. But usually there's some distance. And there's this great house over on, well, I won't mention the name of the street, but it's a very nice neighborhood. People wanted it. Step out in the backyard, oh no, we won't go there. So I know that if we were to move into three-story for residential area, we'd be in trouble. I'm glad to hear we're not planning on that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
My concern on the height limit is that whether it's two stories or three stories, it's still 30 feet high with a certain amount that you can go above that, regardless of whether you have two stories in a residential zone. And then in the commercial zone, there is no story limit, there's just the same height limit, which could potentially mean that very close to the street on Ojai Avenue, you could have a three-story structure given that height limit.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that that's what we want. I understand that in the overlays where the state mandates that you have to allow three stories in order to obtain your numbers, well, that's a different issue. But I'm telling you, the Planning Commission was adamant that they felt that our current height limits were consistent with what they felt was in the best interest of Ojai.
Mr. Mayor.
I just happen to disagree with it.
I had a couple other things to
Yeah.
say. I have a copy of the code with the height limits on it. And one of the things that I think maybe was overlooked in that discussion was the width of some of the lots. In an R1 zone with a lot that's, they don't even mention a 50-foot wide lot. And there's a tremendous number of lots in Midtown that are 50 feet wide and 150 feet deep, with a 5-foot setback on one side and a 12-foot setback on the other. So if you have the ability to go 30 feet in a 50-foot wide lot with a 5-foot setback, you can potentially eliminate a home's ability to benefit from solar installations. You eliminate their ability to have sun in the wintertime and have a winter garden because of 30-foot structure in a 50-foot wide lot. It's going to completely decimate that other house's benefit of sunlight. So, and even at an 80-foot wide lot, as far as the, and there's some other things within that planning commission meeting, because I'd watch it as well. They talked about height limit restricting creativity for architectural reasons, but the reality is, you know, I have to say that there are a myriad of beautiful examples of architecture that can be created within a 25-foot height limit with maybe one or two, a chimney or one small percentage of the architecture being allowed to go up to a 30-foot possibly or something like that. So that there's creative ways. Mid-century modern's a classic example. It's very popular right now, and it certainly isn't 30 feet high. The other things about this, and you know, I think everybody knows I'm really adamant about height limits in our community, and there's a lot of reasons why. for me, and I just have 5 reasons, and then I'll be finished. One is the effect on the neighborhoods and the privacy and sunlight factor, which I think is really something that really needs to be considered, because it is a town with a lot of very narrow lots and small cottages. Thus, it can have effect on property value, and it's interesting that Dale mentioned this, because clearly it is affecting someone's property values. They aren't able to sell their home because they have a neighbor. Is it the neighbor looming over them? So I think it does have some potential property value impact. The other thing is, of course, the obstruction of the view shed, which diminishes our small town character, and it also potentially impacts the appeal of the town to tourism, because our tourism, I think we all understand our tourism is rooted in our small town character, and a relief for people when they come here from urbanization. And so I would suspect that it could really impact our local economy. So all of those reasons are really in a capsule why I believe that it's not unreasonable to have a 25-foot height limit with, and I'd be willing to say with a certain percentage allowed to go higher for certain architectural elements, but have it only be a certain percentage, and also in a 50-foot wide lot not being allowed to be put at the 5-foot side of that property, so that that potential architectural feature would be impeding a neighbor's ability to benefit from sunlight. So all in all, I just think that it's not an unreasonable thing to do, and I think it's also really easy. Joni Mitchell's song keeps going through my head, you don't know what you got till it's gone. You pay paradise to put up a parking lot. That's been going through my head as I've been thinking about this, and I think sometimes you don't realize really the impact until it's happened, and then it's too late. So regardless of whatever gets decided tonight or in the future about heights, I think we need to have story poles be part of our requirement whenever there's any architecture above 2 stories, above 1 story, pardon me. And also, the other thing is, this planning commission is a great planning commission, but they're not always going to be here. Right now, I feel they are very sensitive to our community and what it is we want to be as a community and how we want to protect it. But we can't predict the future and what we're going to have in the way of a commission. And sure, this could be changed, but we all know how hard it is to change things once they're written and codified. So I think we need to be aware that we're talking not about just today or a few years from now. I think we're also talking about into the future and how we're going to protect into the future as well as today what the community is that we all love. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments by the council?
Yes.
Councilwoman Smith.
It says here right on page 3-6 that basically if it is a single-story residence and it's more than 20 feet, it would be subject to a design review permit reviewed at the commission. And also, don't we have, if it's a design review permit that's required and it was going to go up to 30 feet, and it was just one part that was the steep design, that's way different than a massive structure on the lot that goes right to the 5-foot limit. So would we have, at the current limit, would we have control of not allowing the massive structure with only 5 feet at the fence that reached 30 feet the whole building? And could we allow, because the architecture required for one part to be a little tower that went to 30 feet rather than the whole structure? Because I also agree with Councilwoman Clapp. I do not want to see massive, bulky 30-foot buildings in residential areas that do impede people's privacy and view and use up the whole lot. But I think the Planning Commission very, very clearly said they do not want it limited, thinking that our design review and all would eliminate the possible bulky structures.
Yeah, the reason I looked for some of those other examples is for that very reason. Right now, we say our limit's 30 feet or 35 feet, depending on the zone, and then it's up to the Planning Commission through the design review process to make sure that it's not too massive or too bulky. What some of these other communities have done is they've said, generally speaking, it should be 26 feet, but we'll allow architectural features to break that plane through design review. So it sends a little bit different message to the property owner when they're designing it. that they need to really justify any reason why they would go up above 25 feet. And I'm sure you could build into that you should consider solar access, and you should consider protecting the privacy of the neighboring property,
Right,
especially
right,
where you have close setbacks and so forth, or have a percentage of the building that must be at 25 feet, but another percentage can be above. So it's similar, but I think maybe a little bit stronger the way they have it in Encinitas and the way they have it in
Well, I would be more
Saratoga.
comfortable with that, rather than going ahead and having the 30 foot, having the possibility that, yes, parts of the structure can go over 25 feet if it's architecturally called for, but shade and eliminating the neighborhood's possibility for solar energy, no, we shouldn't do that.
Just a quick question for Mayor Blatz,
Yes.
if I may.
Councilman
For
Lara.
City Manager, Mr. Clark, did you give this information to our planning commission when they decided they didn't know of these ordinances?
No. I was asked the question last week, and so I just looked around really quickly. So it wasn't really a very extensive review, and the Planning Commission has not seen it.
But I see in their comments, they're more or less going in that direction, that they don't want to necessarily make it so hard and fast that an architectural design wouldn't partially go above 25 feet, you see.
And I also have a comment on what Member Clapp had to say about the 5-foot setback. I do a lot of gardening, and I look at how shades and sunlight come in, and 20 feet, 5-foot setback does give you a lot of shade sometimes, especially if you're trying to build a vegetable garden or something in that nature. You need as much sunlight as you can. So maybe we should look at setbacks too, depending, and I also want to just caution, because we're looking at R0, R1, R2, R3, R5, and they're all different depending on the size of the property. So I don't know if that's what the planning commission also take into consideration, because maybe 25-foot height and then allowing some percentages, that's really not going to affect the amount of sunlight that they have on their property, or the view preservation. It's not going to really affect others. So I tend to really be cautious about going against our planning commission, and I want them to have the freedom, the flexibility to provide that if we can, and not impose too much on our citizens.
I'll point out that the Planning Commission, the night when this came before them, only had 5 members. They didn't have 7. But it's on page 4 or 5 of Attachment A. It's pretty well spelled out as exactly the way our Planning Commission felt. They voted 5-0 that in single-family zones, it is not feasible to drop the height requirement from 30 feet to 25 feet because of the architectural considerations. Then they voted 4-1 that in non-residential zones, they would like to lead the code as is written, 30 and 35 feet height limit, and not specify 2 or 3 stories. And then they voted 5-0 if a single-story residential structure was going to be taller than 20 feet, it would be subject to a design review permit reviewed by the commission. That part I agree with, because right now, you could build in an R1 zone a single-story, 30-foot-high building with no architectural review, and it would probably be an ministerial approval. So I agree with point 3, that anything over 20 feet should be subject to design review, and they voted on that 5-0. But they also voted 5-0 that it wasn't feasible to reduce the height limit from 30 to 25 feet.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Councilwoman Clapp.
Another thing in the discussion that I see is it says the commission did not favor any such reductions nor any limitation on the number of allowed stories for commercial buildings,
That's correct.
nor any limitation. So, you know, I like to the Planning Commission is advisory. And I take what they say very seriously, but I also don't always agree. And I just don't think it would be best for our community to allow no limitation in height in commercial buildings. And again, I'm back to these small lots again. You go to an RO4, RO2, RO1, those are like 4 acres, 2 acres, an acre, you know. That's, you know, I could see potentially 30 feet on that size of lot.
But these tiny lots.
But these tiny lots that we're talking about, 12,000, 10,000, 11, you know, 9,000, 8,000 square foot lots, it just, with 5-foot setbacks, it just doesn't work for our community. So, and I agree with Mr. Blatz that, I agree about the 20-foot single story. I mean, yeah, that somebody can go to 30 feet now over the desk.
Right.
So that, I absolutely agree with that. So I think that we should really move forward with a height limit. And do it, maybe this is part of the neighborhood planning as well. It falls within that, but I don't want us to drag on for 2 years either. You know, get caught in the bureaucracy till, you know, never, because there are houses, and I think everyone knows these houses in our community that are 0 lot line, 35 feet high, next to a little cottage.
I know.
Mayor Blatz?
Yes.
I would
Laura.
like to send this back to the Planning Commission with our concerns and they looking at how Encinitas and Saratoga have their height limit and see if that
good idea.
actually, if they agree with that ordinance and if we could kind of adjust it to our taste of how Ojai really is before making a decision right now on the height limit.
Well, I don't
it'd
think we
be
have
prim-
to make a
So
decision tonight.
it's discussion tonight, and I also think that I'd like it to go back to the planning commission with the idea that maybe we should look at it in terms of zones. That if it's an R1, or square footage of lots, or something, to consider adjusting the height
Right.
limits.
I agree.
Right, is it an acre we're talking about,
Yeah.
or are we talking about a narrow lot on Fulton Street? Yeah.
Right.
Right, because, again, back to the 50 to 150-foot deep lots, at the 5-foot setback, a section of that property, maybe there needs to be within the code that you can't go up until you've gone back another so many feet, and then you can go up with your architectural element,
Right.
so that you potentially eliminate the impact of height at that close to the neighbor's property. Yeah, I think we really do need to let them know that, I think that we agree that we want to consider having the limit changed as a body, am I correct?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Mayor Pro Tem
Yes.
Strobel.
I know you missed my voice, so I thought I'd just speak up.
We do.
I was just waiting for it, that's all.
I just want to say that I agree with the Planning Commission for the reasons they stated. I think we can control our height through the design review process. But I did want to go on record to say that, so that it's not 5-0, that we want them to look at it again. I agree with the Planning Commission.
I will also add that the planning commission was very clear that we wanted them to look at it, and that we were very, very much interested in lowering the height, and they still came back with these recommendations. But I don't think that they looked at it in light of Encinitas and Saratoga, and I don't think that they looked at it in light of perhaps looking at square footage of lots.
Of lots, yeah.
I just would, just so that it's clear also, I didn't have a problem with the planning commission recommendation, and I do take their recommendation serious, so.
Yeah. As do I.
All right, so they'll be continued with going back to planning with our recommendations, okay.
Okay? All right, anything further? All right, we're going to adjourn as the Ojai City Council, reconvene as the Ojai Redevelopment Successor Agency. Consent calendar, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
Mr. Mayor, I would move to approve.
Okay? All in favor, or roll call, please?
Laura?
Yes.
Clapp? Yes. Smith?
Yes.
Strobel?
Yes.
Blatz?
Yes. Item number 5 is a discussion item under the Redevelopment Successor Agency, Recognized Obligation Payment Schedule, the ROPS 13-14B. Mr. Clark?
So this schedule governs the amount of money that will be paid to the city for the period January 1st through June 30th of 2014. And we're asking for $125,000, which is half of our administrative budget. We've already received the first half. And then we're also, again, asking for a loan repayment. And although I harbor no illusion that the finance department will accept that, I think it's important, and we've been advised by council that it's important to put it on the ROPS, to go through the meet and confer process, and then at least we're in a position to take advantage of any legal actions that occurred in other communities. I would note that I was on a conference call last week where they said there are 154 lawsuits currently in the system relating to the dissolution of redevelopment agencies. So if this issue becomes a big issue with some larger agency that has a big legal budget, we may be able to piggyback on it. It's a sad state of affairs to have the state legislature pass legislation that's supposed to be a balanced bill, where they can sweep our money away, and then as a reward for that, we can keep our land and we can keep our loan repayment, and then for the Department of Finance to completely reverse that on a technicality. But that's, I'm afraid, what's happened.
Mr. Fletcher, you have anything to add to that?
No, I was going to say that unfortunately, Ojai is not alone. And in fact, the issue of the interest rate on these loans is going to be the next big issue. And I believe that if we go through the process, the meet and confer, and at least the Department of Finance has been consistent in most cases of saying no on some of these issues, because they recognize they're broad-based policy issues, that if it makes sense to us to join some litigation, we can do so. But, and I was going to add on top of the number of cases, and I just actually got hired to advise a district in Orange County who's actually a taxing agency on the other side of one of these. They're all filed in Sacramento Superior Court. So the Sacramento Superior Court has all of these cases. So they're busy, but and there's at least some hope, if not chance, that there could be perhaps some legislative fixes to some of these issues once the legislature and the governor feel a little more flush.
Okay. Thank you. Any other discussion? All right, the recommendation is to adopt a resolution. I'll entertain a motion.
So moved. Resolution number 13, what?
05.
05, adopt resolution RDSA 1305, approving the ROPS 13-14B for the period of January 1st, 2014 through June 30th, 2014.
Okay, second. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Laura?
Yes.
Clapp?
Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
Strobel? Yes. Latz?
Yes. Okay, we're going to adjourn as the successor agency, reconvene as the Ojai City Council. And are there any reports from council members tonight? Councilwoman Smith, anything to report? No. Councilman Lara?
I just want to comment that I hope that everybody had their first day back to school for the Ojai Unified School District, and I hope you guys have a great school year. So that's it.
Councilwoman Clapp.
Well, today's Ojai flow vote.
Yes.
So tomorrow, I guess we'll know. And do you have one?
I have one. I was gonna do it.
Oh, you did it too?
You may do it.
Go ahead, Ron. Go ahead, city clerk.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right.
I'm on the county's website, and right now it's 86.88% yes.
Wow.
13.12% no.
Excellent.
So it has to be a 2/3 vote. If you figure 2,600 ballots went out, we have 1,181 ballots left to be counted if they voted, so hopefully that.
If they vote in the same ratio.
Wow.
Yeah, Ellen, yes.
All right.
6,900.
That's
Great.
terrific.
Mayor Pro Tem Strobel, anything?
wait, I had one more thing.
Oh, okay. You were interrupted.
But no, I have nothing, so go ahead.
Okay, go ahead.
I don't think I brought it. It's on my fridge. You know that E.J. Harrison newsletter? And they tell you what you.
Trash flash.
Yeah, you know they tell you what you can recycle? The only thing on there now that we can't recycle, you know what it is? Styrofoam. So I know that I do a lot of traveling in a lot of communities, no longer allow styrofoam. And there's many alternatives now that are made out of vegetable products for to-go containers and things of that sort. So if it's council's pleasure, I would really like to consider the possibility of having styrofoam be added to to our ordinances to not have them allowed in the city anymore, and also within that, maybe consider plastic eating utensils as well, because that also you can get plastic eating utensils that are biodegradable. So I think it would be great if we move forward on that before they require an EIR from us. I think they required County Ventura an EIR for plastic bag ordinance.
All right,
I would love to see us move forward on that.
okay.
Could- Let me put it this way. At our next meeting, when we have a joint meeting with, or workshop with the Planning Commission, one of the items on there is the Community Development Department work effort. And we've loaded quite a number of things on there. So you're going to have to decide, because I think if you try and have them do 6 things at once, we're not going to get anything done. So we're going to have to do what's important first and then put other things second. But I'll be glad to put this on the list for consideration.
If you would.
Well, hopefully, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. There's other communities that have done this.
Mayor Pro Tem, are you done? Yeah. Okay, Mayor Pro Tem Strobel?
Nothing to report.
Oh, okay. Mr. Clark?
So I just wanted to mention that FEMA has been busy studying the floodplain in the east end of town, both the incorporated and the unincorporated area. And there's going to be a meeting at Chaparral at 6 p.m. on Thursday, at which time FEMA and Supervisor Bennett will be talking about what the proposal is. But the bottom line is that they're proposing to add some more properties within the city of Ojai to the floodplain, which has floodplain insurance impacts for those people. And we've done everything that we can think of to reach out to the people who are affected and let them know that this is in the mill, and to advise them of this particular meeting and so forth.
Okay. Is that it? Just-
I have a question.
Yeah.
What areas are they thinking of adding?
Well, Mr. Grant can show you the map if you'd like, but it's in the east end of town, near the floodplain there.
Yeah. Oh.
Mr. Fletcher, anything tonight? Okay. Chief?
Yeah, I just have a couple quick things. On August 24th, the Ojai deputies, along with the Ventura County Sheriff's Office, conducted compliance checks again for sex registrant compliance checks in the Ojai Valley. And in the city of Ojai, Miners Oaks, Oakview, Casita Springs, they checked on 44 registered sex offenders in these communities, and 36 of the 44 were in compliance with their registration requirements. 8 of the registrants were not contacted because they were not home or they had moved. And so our detectives will follow up to determine if those registrants are out of compliance. As far as the city goes, there were 6 in the city and all 6 were in compliance. So I don't know, did Steve Arthur, when he was here, tell you about our Nixle? Ojai PD's now on Nixle, which Nixle's a communication service, and basically you can sign up for it. It's on the city's website, but you can get messages from the PD that are going to be sent out via cell phone, text message, or email, and you would choose what medium you would like. And these are emergency alerts we're going to put out, crime trends, crime prevention tips, and other safety information. So you can go to www.nixle.com, or you can go to the city's website. And that's all I have, because you know about our Citizens Academy, right? I think he told you about that, so that's all I have.
I might add that the Ventura County Sheriff's Department has an excellent app, too, that you can download for free. And it has all kinds of information on that app. Is that anything on the app incorporated into?
No, this is strictly Nixle, and we're one of some of the cities, the contract cities that are doing it. We're also working on a Facebook site, so a little hesitant on that one, but that's the.
I would encourage anyone that
Yeah.
that has a smartphone or a tablet,
Yeah.
computer,
No, you'll get
download
good
that
info.
app because it has good information in it.
I just want to comment, if I may, Mayor. I want to just applaud you for, I walked my daughter to school today, and it was just great to see that there was patrol cars here and there, making sure there was no fast traffic going, and it was a good day, so thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. We had an extra deputy over at the school today as well, so your cops funds paid for that, so he was over there.
Good.
Yeah.
Thank you. Mr. McClary, anything other than what you've already talked to us about? No? Susie? All right. Mr. Grant? Gee, nothing, huh? Again, thank you for participating in the meeting this afternoon. Oh, we have a question.
Sorry, I'm so sorry. Just real quick, Greg. Greg, real quickly. We were going to get some signs on the bike trail. Whatever happened with that?
Oh, the signs on the bike trail?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, we ordered that through a local sign maker, and it didn't work out. They never delivered.
Oh.
And but it might have worked out just as well, anyways. We landed up finding a fund. We have an AB 939 fund.
Uh-huh.
We found a good manufacturer of recycled signs, so we'll be able to save the city money instead of spending the several thousand. And it also it did jibe perfectly with the TDA grant that we have that was going to rework all the intersections on the bike path.
Oh.
So we're just requesting proposals for that consultant. And we thought we could combine the signs that we're going to put at each one of the intersections, which is going to describe the street. We're going to order those at the same time as the signs we already had. We already modeled and drafted those up for the contractor that we'd ordered back in the fall, but that never came through. We had to cancel that purchase order with them.
Okay, so any idea timeframe?
So we're going to go ahead and work with this consultant that the next meeting, we're going to have the consultant authorized, and then we'll have that, we plan to have it all done by December anyhow, December this year. That'll be the improvements on the intersections as well as the signs.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you, Mr. Grant. Any more updates there, Rhonda? No more. All right. You have anything to? Okay. Do you have anything to add? Okay. All right. Well, we are going to adjourn to a closed session for 3 items. The first item is a conference with real property negotiator under California Government Code Section 54956.9C, and this has to do with the property on the corner of Bald and Pearl Streets. And the agency negotiator is Mr. Clark, the city manager, negotiating partners Craig Young, Eric Bush, Daniel Pauling, on behalf of the Pearl Street Association, and under negotiation, potential terms and condition of land acquisition. The second item is a conference with labor negotiator, California Government Code Section 54957.6. Agency designated representative is our city manager, Robert Clark, regarding non-represented employees. And item number 3 in our closed session is going to be a performance evaluation for the city manager, public employee evaluation under Government Code Section 54957B. Are we expecting there to be any kind of a report coming out of our closed session?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Then we are adjourned to closed session.